everyone, and welcome back to the continued lesson which we were doing in our last class. That was cost of production. Today, we are going to extend in terms of looking at this, that how we can further understand them in the shape of graphs, curves, or diagrams. So last time, a schedule of the cost of production was given. We gave you some of the types of the cost of production. Today, we are going to find how the curves they can presented.
Yeah.
What are their shapes? Usually, when we are further explaining them. So you may see that there are two diagrams before you. So I'm going to put this as diagram 1, and this is your diagram number 2. So you can see that the diagram 1 is actually showing the 3 types of costs, which includes the total cost. I have just abbreviated it as GC, and below that, this curve which you see is known as the variable cost with VC. And we have another that is fixed cost that we are representing over here. And now the very first question which should come in our mind is how did we draw that? If you remember, I assigned you last Friday that these graphs will only be understandable when we take an attempt, when we solve the last worksheet. So I again suggest you that you must try those graphs, those tables, all those cost of production values which were given you in last worksheet on Friday. So on that day, all the curves which you see usually, they can depict these types of curves. You can try them at home again, and I would suggest that continuing that table 1.1 or that table from where you have to fill up all the missing values. You must try that on a separate piece of paper and you can resubmit that. So that can be one of the assignment for you for today, which I'm verbally informing. So you must try that. And how you're going to do that? This is the way. You're going to make 2 diagrams, 2 graphs, on which one side you're going to show all the total, like total cost, total variable cost, and total fixed cost. And the remaining 6 are going to be shown in diagram number 2. So we are going to make 2 diagrams, and the second diagram we are going to take all the average value, including average total cost and average variable cost and average fixed cost. Now look at how they are actually moving. We could see from the table, if you have completed, you will see that the total cost and total variable cost, they are increasing upward. Why they are increasing? Because we know that the more output is increasing, the more cost we are paying. But the fixed cost is something which remains constant. No matter how the output is increasing, your fixed costs remain same. Okay, so in this way, we are going to find out how the average total cost and average variable cost are behaving. As you could see, the total cost and total variable cost, they are both moving parallel. Like if they are increasing, they're all increasing in the same direction. And same it happens when we are drawing its average. So you can see that the average total cost and average variable cost both are almost moving in the same trend. However, the average fixed cost is little different. It is like falling and then it keeps on falling. It never increases. Why? Because the more output you're producing, the rent, the salaries, the fixed cost, so-called, is going to remain the same. So it's going to decrease further, rather it should increase. But variable cost, it's very understandable. The more output you produce, the more cost you pay. But in this diagram, you could see that first of all, the average variable cost is actually falling and then it is increasing. There is one particular reason that why it is happening. The table which I specially drafted for you will speak, and that will always tell you that when you're going to draw the diagram, you will have almost same trend. And that will make you to have a question in your mind that why it's like a U-shaped curve. Why it's in a U shape? It's in U shape because there is one particular reason, and the reason is actually a production law, which is known as the law of diminishing returns, which shows that initially when the output is increasing, your returns increases first, but eventually it falls. So due to that increase in the returns and then falling, same with the cost of production. When the output is increasing, the cost of production, when the returns are increasing, the cost is eventually falling. But when the returns are falling, then the average cost and average variable cost and average cost is going to increase. Now, in this diagram, if we need to measure that where is the fixed cost. So if I just take one point on this graph, this output, and I just give it as Q1. At Q1, if we want to assume that what is the fixed cost area? The area of the fixed cost. So we can obviously see that the total cost curve, total fixed cost curve is something which we can see a horizontal parallel to output axis. It's parallel to the output axis. So it means that the distance from this point to this, let's say if this is point A and this is point B, so for point A to B, this is actually the total distance or area of the total fixed cost. Now what about the total variable cost? On the same output, if I just take this point B and I just extend it to this point, let's say this is point C. So from point C to point B or Q1, this total area will be represented as total variable cost. And if we just extend it further to this area, let's say from Q1 or point B to point D, this total area from this point to this is going to be representing a total cost area. Okay? Now, so this area is going to be known as total cost. From this area to this area is known as the total variable cost, and this whole bracket is known as total cost. There we go. Now, sometimes we see that this whole represent as the total cost, total variable cost, and total fixed cost area. Total fixed cost is from A to B, and from point B to C, it is total variable, and from point B to D is your total cost area. Okay, now let's suppose if somebody asks you that what would be the area of from point D to C. Now there are different areas which we can highlight over. Now this area actually represents also the total fixed cost. How come? You can see that from point D and point C, these are the 2 points which are actually, one of them is the total cost and the other one is for the total variable cost. And we know that the fixed cost is equal to, total cost is equal to fixed cost plus variable cost. Now in this diagram, if we just take total cost and total variable cost area, so that means that we can change the equation. So if we just put the fixed cost over here and we take variable cost on this area minus VC plus TC or total cost, then we can even find the area of fixed cost. So fixed cost area is actually the difference between the variable cost and the total cost. So this area can also, between D and C, can also be known as total fixed cost. Moving on to this diagram, if we take another output over here, let's say Q2, at this area, this bracket may represent average fixed cost, and the area from this area to this one. This would represent as average variable cost. And the area from this to this is going to be known as average total cost. So similarly, this has the same criteria, that this area from this output Q2 is from this region to, let's say, this point. This bracket will represent average fixed cost, and the area between this graph to this axis is going to be known as average variable at this output, and same output from this curve to this axis, this area is going to be as average total cost. So again, if somebody sets that what is the area between these two curves, so these two curves are going to be known as average fixed cost again. So it means that in each diagram, we have two fixed cost area, the area between these two variables and between these two. Why? Because we have this equation which sets that when we have two known values, we can find the missing one. So in these two diagrams, we have the two, we can find out the two known values, and out of that, we can calculate the third missing one. Okay, so in this diagram, we can find out the various areas which we have discovered right now, but now the question is that these curves, as we all know, that they are known as the short run average, a short run cost of production. Now, what about the long run cost of production? And I hope that I need to recall that short run production or the short run cost of production are those in which some of the factors remain constant or fixed, and some of them, they are variable. That's why we get variable cost and the fixed cost. So in the long run, when all the factors are variable, we don't have fixed or we don't have variable, but all the factors are variable. So that's why if we want to know that what are the cost curves in the long run, cost, when all the factors are variable, we believe that the long run average cost curve, we either have long run total cost, and we do have long run average cost. Total cost and that. Now, this total cost is something which represents that it's the total cost which is changing as more output is produced in the long run. In the long run, if you want to produce more, you're increasing all your factors of production. And when all of your factors of production are increasing, that means that your all costs are increasing. Let's say if you are hiring more land, it means that your rent is also increasing. You were paying for one premises and now you're paying for 2 or 3 premises. So your fixed cost is also changing in such scenario when the output is increasing. So where the output is increasing, this is your output, and we believe when the output is increasing, the total average cost is going to increase just like this. So we can say that this is a long run total cost, LRTC. So it's starting from 0. Have you noticed that in the previous diagram, your total cost was starting somewhere from here, like this. This was your total cost in the previous diagram. Now, this is your total cost in the short run, dear students. And this is something in the long run. Why is this so? Why the short run is starting above the origin? It's just because you have to pay the fixed cost, which remains even you don't produce. So at 0 output, you're still paying some cost over here. This was your fixed cost, short run. But in the long run, your fixed cost is changing. So No fixed cost and variable cost exist over there. So in the end, you are going to pay somewhere starting from the origin 0. So if there is 0 output, then you're going to not pay any cost in the long run. But more output you're producing, the more cost you are paying in terms of when you are producing in the long run. If this is the long run total cost, and if it is rising from 0 to onward this way, so it means that if we want to plot now the average cost curve, what shape it would have. So it's going to have the same shape as it was in the short run average cost curve. And this would be your long run average cost curve. You can see that this curve is also something which is falling first and then it is increasing. Now it's the time when I have to tell you that what is the reason that why average costs is falling and then increasing. In the short run, as I told you, that it is due to a law. In the short run, the average cost, why it is in U shape. The reason is because of law of diminishing returns. The law simply says that when you have one variable factor and other factors remain constant, the more output you try to produce or more workers or inputs you produce, the more returns you get in the beginning, but eventually it falls. But what about in the long run? Why the long run curve average cost, let me put cost on this as well. Why in the long run average cost is falling first? Why it is in the U shape? Now U shape means that it is falling first and then it is increasing. Now in this we have to mention another concept, because there we know that in the long run not all the factors are remaining constant and some of them they are remaining variable. Since all of them they are variable, so it means that law of diminishing return is actually not the answer for this. The only answer is that this is changing due to the concept of economies and diseconomies of scale of production. We know that large firms, when they are producing, they eventually get some benefits and some disadvantages. So they are known as economies and diseconomies of scale. We have a separate topic and a discussion for that, which we can discuss in our upcoming lessons. But so far, economy of scales tells us that how average cost falls and how the diseconomies are going to increase the cost. So it means that if it is falling from point A to this lowest point of this average cost, point B, this is truly just because of the economies of scale. And when it's falling from, increasing from point B to, let's say, point C, so this rise is due to the reason diseconomies of scale of production. Now, which scale of production is? A large scale of production. And why we are calling it large scale? Since in the long run, you can produce on the large scale, you can increase your factors of production, which means that you are now increasing the scale of your production. So this is the answer for today, and a difference between how the cost curves can be derived. And again, I'm reminding you, when you are going to solve the table which I will have given you on Friday worksheet, then you will better understand what shape of the curves would be there. And again, I have, in the end, I have compared it with the long run cost curves, giving you the reason what shape of the curves they are going to be. And now I'm going to come on to your chat room right now. Immediately, I have a worksheet prepared for you on which we can do some question extracted from the past papers. So give me a minute. I'll be back with you over there.